I've always wanted to try these out. These were my father's. Be warned that the content of this video may be distressing. A cool head is needed. First, to review, the principle of inalienable rights is the requirement of the individual to be free to act on his own judgment. So it makes no difference what he is capable of. He doesn't need to be independent or self-sufficient. The deciding factor is that he lacks any other means of survival. A fetus in the womb obtains all the necessities of life via the umbilical cord from the mother's body. So this is an alternate means of survival. Thus, the principle of rights does not apply to it. The principle of inalienable rights applies only to individual separate human beings, and this typically begins at birth, when the cord ceases to function. Not when it is cut, but just before, at the moment when cutting it would have no detrimental effect. Typically the baby is breathing on his own, turning pink and starting to cry, and so on. I observed all of this with the birth of my own 2 daughters, and both times insisted that I be the one to cut the cord. This is the moment when rights apply, and consequently it is also the first moment when the concept of murder can apply. I recall standing there both times, scissors at the ready, watching the birth, knowing that if something were to go wrong, we had already agreed with the doctor that saving my wife would take priority over saving the unborn fetus. But when the baby was out and the doctor had clamped the cord and given me the go-ahead to cut, I already recognized that another new individual was present, and I was equally motivated to ensure that no harm ever came to our new baby. So this is the key point upon which the entire issue pivots. That is, the instant when the principle of inalienable rights first applies. It is the difference between the destruction of fetal tissue versus the murder of a human individual. This point is crucial, and I recommend giving yourself plenty of time to absorb it. It took me several years to integrate the ideas. If you want to review the earlier videos, this will be a good time to do it. Now let's examine the concept of abortion, or terminating a pregnancy. A successful abortion means that all fetal tissue, the cord and placenta, must be removed from the mother's body and disposed of. If any is left behind in the womb, it may become toxic to the mother. If the fetus is removed alive, you now have a newborn baby on your hands just as you would had you waited for it to be born naturally. Killing it at this point would be murder. Now, assuming the baby is premature, you must either take extraordinary measures to keep him alive, with the possibility that he will be permanently crippled in some way, or leave him alone and wait for nature to run its course, that is, wait for him to die on his own. Depending upon the circumstances, such as the stage of development of the fetus, this may be considered negligence. I'll come back to that subject in a future video. This is important. As unpleasant as it is to recognize, a successful abortion means that the fetus must be killed before the moment when it can be murdered, which means while the cord is still functioning. Typically this is done while the fetus is still in the womb. I won't describe the procedure other than to say that in the absence of expert doctors, sterile surgical procedures, and general anesthetic, numerous homemade methods have been tried. Women, desperate to rid themselves of an unwanted pregnancy and wanting to avoid the harsh judgment of relatives and neighbors, would try it on their own, punching themselves in the stomach, falling down stairs, making use of whatever tools were available around the home. This tool, an unbent coat hanger, is probably the most horrifying thing I can think of. Now consider what would happen if the cord were cut first. The fetus now has no alternative means of survival than the rest of us, and we must recognize that the principle of inalienable rights applies. The tragedy is that he is now trapped in the womb, unable to breathe. It is a case of one separate individual human contained within another. If the baby, the former fetus, is not rescued immediately, he will die, and whoever cut that cord will be the murderer. Now let's consider the term partial birth abortion. As we can see, destroying a fetus still in the womb is invasive and risky. A somewhat less risky alternative is to induce labor and delivery, but kill the fetus while it is still dependent on the cord. That is, only moments before it can be considered an act of murder. If the moment is missed, then of course it becomes a live birth with the likelihood of prematurity and other harm to the baby. There is currently at least one abortion doctor spending the rest of his life in prison for murdering a baby because he waited just a few too many seconds. Let's take a moment to consider that the average female is born with as many as 6 million potential egg cells, of which perhaps 500 are produced and disposed of during her lifetime. The average male produces as many as 500 billion sperm cells in his lifetime. One egg and one sperm cell are necessary to result in a pregnancy. Both have life-producing potential. The discarding of unwanted egg and sperm cells is routine, and indeed we hardly give it a thought. Even after the two have joined, something may not be quite right, and nature will cause a miscarriage. My mother once mentioned that she had at least 2 miscarriages before I was born. I might have had a couple of older siblings. I might have had 500 of them. Well, I think the record for human births by one woman stands at 69. But do I miss my potential siblings? Not at all. In fact, I'm very glad I didn't have to compete with dozens of siblings for the attention of my parents. Now, when you consider all the sperm and eggs that never result in a pregnancy, and that only about 1 out of 4 fertilized eggs actually takes, is terminating a pregnancy such a horrible thing? Not really, especially if it's done in the earliest stages. Nature does it routinely. A related topic. Suppose a woman has an egg removed and placed in a heated test tube, actually a petri dish, where it is fertilized by mixing in sperm from a donor. Now, its means of survival is not an umbilical cord. Its survival depends on the charitable actions of the people who operate the machinery and provide it with nourishment, just like a person on a ventilator, kidney dialysis, or a heart-lung machine. We wouldn't think of murdering anyone in that condition. In short, a fertilized egg in a dish has the same requirement for the freedom to act as anyone else. Not the capacity or the ability to survive, but the requirement to act on judgment, either his own, which he doesn't yet have, or the person taking care of him. What would it mean to destroy a fertilized egg at this stage? Before we consider that mind-boggling concept, consider that typically, to improve the chances of success, many eggs are harvested and fertilized in a petri dish, and only the healthiest or the most desirable one is implanted back into the woman desiring to become pregnant. The remaining unfertilized eggs and unused sperm cells are disposed of along with the unchosen fertilized eggs. Is this murder? Not necessarily. It depends upon the stage of development. I'll have a lot more to say about this in a future video. For now, I'll just say that in order to require freedom to act on judgment, a faculty of judgment, meaning a brain, must exist, at least in some form. It's not present from conception. Let's move on. A pregnant woman is out shopping. A deranged gunman takes aim and shoots. She is hit in the head and dies. The fetus in her womb is unharmed, but cannot be saved. Is it one murder or 2? I'm going to say 2. 3 if she's carrying twins, and so on. Here's why. While the mother is alive, the fetus has an alternate means of survival. But when her heart stops, no more oxygen will be available to the placenta to transport to the fetus. The placenta and cord might as well not even exist. The fetus, you can call him a baby now, is on his own, but trapped in the womb. This next one actually occurred only a few years ago. An 8-month pregnant woman was murdered and her body dumped in San Francisco Bay. Her body took some time to die, and as it washed ashore, expelled the fetus, which survived briefly, then drowned. 1 murder or 2? I say the killer was responsible for both. Last one. This one happened more recently. A man kidnapped a teenage girl, kept her captive in his home for many years, raped her, impregnated her, then beat her until her body miscarried the fetus. 5 times he did this. She survived. Certainly horrific crimes, but was there ever a murder? As far as I know, a baby was never alive and separate at any time, so no. Regardless, we can all hope that the perpetrator never again sees the light of day. Okay, no more gruesome examples. Many people believe in some form of supernaturalism and will say something such as, "The God of my religion creates all humans at conception, and only He is authorized to make life and death decisions. So in accordance with our beliefs, we insist that the practice of abortion be outlawed," meaning forcibly prevented by government. Let's think about what it would mean to outlaw abortion. Abortion, not murder. Murder has already been outlawed in civilized countries. This gets very interesting. First of all, outlawing abortion means protecting the rights of something for which rights don't yet apply. That's a contradiction right there. But equally important, it means violating the rights of the pregnant woman who has not herself violated anyone's rights. There's no way around that. It means that a woman who has chosen this course of action must be charged with a crime. Now we can reduce it to absurdity by recognizing that for a government to successfully prevent every abortion, it must assign a policeman to follow behind every pregnant woman from the moment of conception to the moment of delivery, to forcibly restrain her should she consider taking unlawful action. That's obviously outside the realm of possibility, so instead, government can only shut down abortion clinics, leaving the abortion doctor with a destroyed business, and the pregnant woman to take matters into her own hands. At this point, other issues typically come up, such as supposing the pregnancy was caused by rape or incest, or the woman had a medical emergency, or knows she would be an unfit mother, or is destitute, and so on. Well, they say we could make exceptions for those. So what does that mean? It means the government would then be in charge of tailoring the law for each person based on another person's religious beliefs. I'll have much more to say about the injustice of that sort of thing another time. About all you can do is persuade them to agree to refrain. For example, my neighbors and I maximize our property values by following these agreements. One of them says that we agree not to run a business from our homes of the type where customers come and go. So this means that there will not be any abortion clinics in my neighborhood. The only time government is involved is when someone breaks his agreement. If he persists, then the homeowners association insists that he leave the neighborhood. The same sort of thing can be done in business districts. This is actually done today with municipal statutes, zoning laws, etc. Unfortunately, in the case of cities and towns, the peaceful, voluntary private corporation acts more like the strong arm of government force. More on that another time. In any event, using this method of private agreements, it is possible to peacefully prohibit the practice of abortion from geographic areas. The downside is you are never going to eliminate the occasional demand for an abortion, and a woman with nowhere to turn is going to take matters into her own hands. I'll wrap it up here. You've probably observed, as I have, that the debate over abortion has raged for decades, and the only arguments presented have been variations of, "It's my body and I'll do what I want," versus, "My religious beliefs say, no, you can't." So there has been no principled approach for as long as I can remember. What I hope you got from this video is that there is a principle operating here. There is a fine line between abortion and murder, and we can identify precisely where that line is. Provided an abortion is performed properly, you can't rightfully interfere. You can only persuade.